Señorita Blanco, the Artsy sister, and we're reading Saturnastra Rimaru. This is chapter 13, part 1. Or just chapter 13. Anyhow, Rimaru will delight you with your music, which is equally important for the development of our country and our culture to be exposed to different sounds. Said Kasha. Said Artsy. Kasha shockingly said, really? You had like years, and you come back with just a singer, not a politician, a spy, a blacksmith, a farmer, or any other type of fellow with use for information or technology. Fine, tell her to sing. Is she a dragon? I hear tales of them, and I really want to see a dragon made of flesh and blood. I'm sorry, sire, but the explorers are still working in acquiring a dragon, said Artsy apologetically. Rimaru eventually noticed among the crowd her little brother Ahi. He waved at Rimaru, and Rimaru nodded in return, and Kasha then said, "Ah yes, the other musician. You can do a duet or something. I found his jug playing fascinating. Let's see how he combines with your singing." That he had like this. He just showed up to do when he was back to the king to amuse, and all he did was that. Rimaru went to stand before the king, and he followed in suit. And Rimaru said to his brother, "Can you play like a real instrument this time?" "I brought spoons with me," said Ahi, taking out spoons, and his mouth with his sharp little dragon teeth, and his hair was still as flaming red as ever, which combined well with his red eyes. And he was sporting a mad harlequin costume with black and red checkerboard patterns with a red cape over it. "Just do whatever you want," Ahi said, Rimaru sighing. Ahi grinned, and then he brought out from under his cape his new favorite instrument, the balafon. And he then placed a couple of sticks around his neck to anchor the harmonica, and smiling he added, "I can get more instruments if you like." It's fine, said Rimaru sighing. And this conversation lasted only a second, since Rimaru was trying to pose as a normal person, and he was pretending not to know Ahi. And Ahi was doing whatever he felt like as usual. Still, Ahi was not too keen in ruining his sister's little game, and Rimaru had never been able to compose proper music, though his interpretations of old songs were always amusing. And after thinking of it, Rimaru decided to sing one of her favorite songs. And he was familiar with the instrumental, and with his two instruments he did a proper rendering of the music, and he could say that if he butchered Rimaru's favorite song, his life would be in peril. And Rimaru, like his mother, was at times a very petty person. They sang Cherry, Cherry Lady. As to be expected, Kasha did not know what to make of the song. It also did not help that Rimaru sang the song in English and not in the native tongue spoken by Kasha. And the court mumbled and went off as they decided whether they liked it or not. And so, like a child trying out an unfamiliar dish, Kasha said, "It was fine, I guess. Are folks in your country one-trick ponies? Can you dance? Dancing is more artsy. And why don't you show us a little dance routine?" And indeed, Kasha preferred music that one could dance to, and he had heard the day previous he playing a waltz on his violin, and just by the structure of the music alone, Kasha could tell that it was something you could dance to. And together with her brother Ahi, Rimaru performed Coppelia afterwards, so Ahinda pretends to be Coppelia. And without music or content, the ballet looked quite bizarre. And at this point, both Rimaru and Ahi were just trolling Kasha and Artsy. And by the end of the performance, Kasha was in tears from laughter at the nonsense, and the nobles followed, joining suit, and the laughter that as soon as a loud clapping was heard. And Kasha rose from his seat as well as the other nobles, who were following in motion to see the arrival of his visitor. And Sativa did not bother to look back, for he was busy talking with the Hamadryas. And as for Mindy, she had gotten bored of being hidden away in a box and had left the castle to wander about the city. The visitor was none other than KC7 Brutus. Brutus walked forward, and he came to see Rimaru from up close, and the nobles continued to whisper and speculate. And Rimaru knew the recorded appearances of the KC units, and each had one particular quirk or another, and the KC number referred to how many artificial intelligence were running at the same time. And each one had a particular task, with the name Brutus being the Eagle AI. And it was a matter of some debate who was the creator of such units, and each KC unit had a particular different story about how they originated. Still, they all had one commonality. There was at most only one KC unit per planet, and usually when one met another of their fellows, they were usually and if the units could not depart from the planet, they usually placed as much distance from one another as possible. And the main issue that they often differ on was how they related to humans, and since they tended to resist mind reading and hacking rather easily, it was hard to verify the veracity of whatever each case unit claimed. And as such, for Brutus in specific, he had a humanoid-looking face with soft, roundish contours, and the eyes were large, sweet, and green, and he had a small mouth with slight pink tone, and the hair was long and curly with a gentle honey color. And since the robe was in the knee muscles, he had a slender frame, and muscle used soft muscle technology, and this allowed him to carry 200 times his own weight, and as far as hand-to-hand combat capabilities, a single punch of Brutus carried over 100,000 newtons in force, and this was all based on observation data. In other cases, units have been capable of performing even more feats of strength, but they tended to overheat. Brutus' light Rimaru could easily pass for male or female, and his voice, however, was pitched to be more feminine. And normally Brutus sported his armor and his helmet, and the armor also functioned as a fashion statement, and he wore it with nanos that changed the look to resemble people clothing, and the helmet also served as a similar gimmick, sometimes taking the shape of crowns, and even clothes as well. And the solid armor pieces, which kept communication with the nanobots, were always solid. And these were the crystals, one on the part of the forehead, and one in the middle of the lumbar vertebrae, and one in the heart, two in the knees and elbow, and a few tiny ones in the joints of the finger and toes. And they were placed to defend the most vulnerable parts of the robot, or just to highlight its strongest aspect. Perhaps it was a fashion statement of the maker of the casing units, or maybe Brutus had added them himself. Today, surprisingly enough, Brutus was not sporting any of his crystals, and without them he passed for a regular human. And behind Brutus there was a tiny fairy-looking creature, and the core material resembled the crystals Brutus used as an armor. And Rimaru eyed Brutus over the top and was soon disinterested in the fellow, and Brutus noticed Rimaru's disdain, and he frowned. The little fairy said to Brutus, "Isn't that something? It has been like forever since we saw Ballet." "I thought you were not talking to me today," said Brutus, laughing. "I was talking to Seven," said the little fairy. "Seven doesn't speak to anyone these days, and now since we found the underground base with the archives with the old TV show," said Brutus. And the pair ranted a bit about their wanderings and so forth, and eventually the fairy came out to Rimaru and she said, "You are not from around here." "I could say the same thing about you," said Rimaru. "I am Loriga," said the little fairy. "Pleased to meet you." "She is actually Arm 1QD Hela," said Brutus. "That's my slave name," said Loriga. Rimaru bowed and said, "Nice to meet you." Kasia by now had left the throne and was walking there to meet Brutus, and Loriga trembled and changed forms into an amorphous, blackish, floaty liquid with several solid crystals, and Loriga hid behind Brutus as she said, "I don't want to talk to Kasia." Smiling, Kasia said, "How are you, Brutus?" "The same as ever," said Brutus, placing his hand on his hip. And since Brutus was not sporting his armor, he was wearing a priest's outfit, and the priests were the only fellows in the kingdom who had not been taken in by the current vogue. And the priest's outfit was a simple white dress with no shoes, and it came with a long-sleeved coat and long white pants, and both male and female monks wore a white headscarf tied by a single circlet, and depending on the rank of the monk, the circlet was adorned with a stone. And since Brutus was technically the lowest-ranking monk, he had a little opal on his head. And Brutus liked opals, and he smiled and said to Kasia, "So you finally brought home something of worth?" "Did I?" asked Kasia, desiring for Brutus to elaborate. And like most kids raised in the temple, Kasia saw Brutus' approval, and from time to time Brutus was known to raise some of the orphans in the temple as his own children, and Kasia had been one of those lucky few that had caught Brutus in a particular maternal type of mood. "Can you lend me the dancing lady? I bet the priest and the children will find her ever so amusing," said Brutus. "I am not on loan," retorted Rimaru. "Oh, so you did not come here as a slave?" asked Brutus. "Not as far as I can tell, and I would like to see who puts a bell on this cat," said Rimaru, starting to depart from the castle. And neither Brutus nor Rimaru waited to hear Kasia's response, and Sativa followed after Rimaru, and the little party took a boat to the ziggurat, and as they sailed, Rimaru saw Mindis on top of the stairs overlooking the entire city. And Brutus started to see what Rimaru was staring at, and he said, "The temple looks quite plain, but on the inside it has a lot of cool artworks." As the most temple, you've been to one, you've seen them all, says Sativa yawning, and he added, if business does not pick up, I feel that I am going to have to vegetate somewhere else. Brutus noticed Sativa's fangs and his overall demeanor. And Luricadena's Brutus, is he a vampire? I have been called that before, said Sativa. Are you then, Mrs. Lurica? I drink blood, therefore that falls under the definition of being vampiric, so take it or leave it. And what you take me for doesn't affect me in the least, as long as you do not try me, said Sativa. Time?
13 minutes.
Neat. I have some brands you can feast on, if it pleases you, said Brutus, smiling. I don't particularly like young blood, said Sativa. Too much sugar, it messes with my pancreas. You're such a disappointment, said Brutus, sighing. The pair continued jabbering on, and in the meantime, Rimaru was pondering on how she wanted to spend her time on this world. And he started humming a little tune, and Brutus and Sativa stopped arguing to listen, and when they arrived to the temple, the monks greeted Brutus cordially, and the shooter gathered around Brutus and started pestering him to play, and Brutus smiling said, how about a bit of a play fight? No fair, you always win, whined O'Brien. No, I mean, I will fight a fellow for your amusement, said Brutus, starting to stretch. I'm not helping today, said Lorica, departing. No, was I expecting you to do something today, pouted Brutus. And Brutus came out to Rimaru, and he gave her a cordial punch on the shoulder. And Rimaru, who was still pretending to be a normal maiden, pouted and started crying. And Brutus said, I'm sorry, I thought you were a vampire like the other fellow. Shame on you for hitting a woman, said Mindy, jumping from the top of the cigarette. I swear I will avenge your shoulder. How about you? Like Mindy finally found someone who wanted to finally found a violent individual that she can murder. Mindy then brought out an urumi. The urumi was a long wobbly sword, and it was the perfect hybrid between a whip and a sword. And Mindy has seen some other fellow monks practicing with it, and she has decided to give it a go. And Brutus just so happened to be the perfect excuse for her to do some violence upon someone. And the urumi she took was rather long, and it reminded Mindy of a very heavy lasso, or a string used in gymnastics. And after calibrating away a little, Mindy was ready for battle. And Brutus was familiar with the weapon, having learned the martial arts taught by the warrior monks, and he ran towards the armory, and he came back with 2 short urumis. These ones had secret blades, and each came with 3 blades coming out in the same handle. And Brutus felt confident, and he started swinging around the blades. And the urumi was a type of defensive weapon to be used when one was surrounded. And Brutus created a circle around him of slashes, and Mindy's whirled and did the same thing with her own weapon, and they clashed, and her weapon got pulled back, and so did the one of Brutus. And what he did not count on was Mindy smacking him with her own tentacle, and the pair danced and twirled their bizarre whip swords, and eventually Brutus slashed away a piece of Mindy's tentacle, and she allowed it to drop limply on the floor, and she retreated slowly, and eventually Brutus was standing on top of the piece of her fallen flesh. And it was then when it became animated, and it flew up and caught Brutus straight in the face. And he started whining until Mindy removed her tentacle before putting it back up, and Brutus' face was slobbed in her weird mucus type of blood, and frowning Brutus said, I'm going to have to remember that trick. Aha, I still got you, said Mindy, celebrating. Well done, Mindy, said Rimaru cackling mechanically. Thank you, said Mindy's bowing. And so some of the rats started to complain a bit while the others gave Mindy's her due. And after a little short skirmish, Brutus gave the visitors a tour of the temple, and just like he had said, the walls were adorned with lovely murals and painting. And the temple was still a progress of being improved upon, and in the top tier there was a monk with a drum, and he was in the middle of checking out the acoustic of it, and the works of art themselves were iconoclastic, and they featured animals and still lifes. And the last item on the menu was a visit to the original temple, and it was in the heart of the ziggurat. The temple was small and only had 1 tier, and it was square-shaped with no windows and just an iron door. Time?
9 minutes.
Brutus explained. This was the sanctum of the old temple, and behind that door there lies a staircase to an old sacristy. And back in the old days, only the main priest and his chosen followers were allowed to enter. So what? Asked a bored Sativa. Brutus placed his hand inside his pocket, and he brought out a very old key. Smiling, he said, What? Want to come inside to take a look? Sure, why not, said Rimaru. And the door was opened and down they descended, and the stairs leading to the hidden temple could only be accessed by pressing a hidden button the size of a small nail, and without knowing what to press, one could easily get distracted by the old iconography. And the temple did show pictures of humans, and each represented a virtue, and the ones liked by the priests of the old temple were courage, patience, modesty, justice, truthfulness, wit, kindness, and charity. And the entrance to the temple was accessible through the nail that held up the letter of the first word that meant truthfulness. And beyond the stairs, hidden from the private eyes, was a chamber of opulence, with plenty of golden items, diamonds, jewelry, painting, cushion, beds, and other items. And certain items on display made Sativa comment, I can see why chastity was not one of the listed virtues. I had seen it now, said Rimaru, started to walk up the stairs. Is it still being in use, or is this like a test or something, asked Mindy. It is a test, said Brutus. The old temple was cleansed of all impurities, and now all of the priests are recruited exclusively for orphans, and they get a free meal, and if they get to show that they have a good heart, then they get groomed to be priests. And now they get shipped back to the city with a letter of recommendation. And in the others, they used to recruit anyone who pretended to have an ounce of piety, and they would play pretend for a couple of years and feed in their beasts in secret, and once they rose in their ranks, they would completely indulge. And you see, back then, since most of the priests were nobles, they did not take too well to the monastic life, and in yonder time, the noble priests had more influence over the city. And the current priests may be purer, but they are walking on thin ice most of the time. Nobody likes a preachy prophet that bursts your bubble, commented Mindy. Is that why you're here? Asked Sativa. Nah, I just like raising weak small children, said Brutus, smiling. Mother has the same hobby as well, said Rimaru coyly. Ah, yes, I suppose it would be considered a hobby, seeing as I get no remunerations for my efforts, and a good number of times the students turn out to be a disappointment, said Brutus, sighing. Time?
6 minutes, 30 seconds.
I blame it on the mainlanders, said Lorica, who finally felt like butting into the conversation. And after a little too, Rimaru performed for Brutus and his little orphans, and Rimaru did not bother to sing, but she danced. And to go with her Pika spider dance, Sativa played the acoustic melodica. And in this dance, Rimaru mimicked the movements of the Pika spider, and due to her contortions and strange four-legged dancing, she came out rather amusing to the small children. And Brutus picked up a random orphan, and he asked Rimaru, may I interest you in buying an orphan? Meh, raising kids is not really my thing, said Rimaru. How would you know if you never tried it? Asked Brutus. You do take care of plants well, and you check on them, and you check in every day at the status of your weird habitat of yours, said Sativa. I don't see why caring for a brown would not be your thing. Well, they grew up and leave Neverland to become douches, explained Rimaru. You said you left Neverland as well, Rimaru, said Brutus. So does that make you a douche? It certainly does, said Lorica. Rimaru sighed, and then she said more to herself. I can see now why he never stays in one place for very long, and I have been here for less than a day, and I already want to depart. The way I see it, you need to be at peace with yourself in spite of the state of the world, said Brutus. That is easier said than done, said Rimaru, sighing again. Why don't you give the temple life a short, meditative shot, and meditate a little, and then see if you can find your inner peace, suggested Brutus. It worked for us, said Lorica. If you want to stay, it works fine by me, said Sativa. And I still need to kill 572 more people before I leave Saturn, said Mindy. I can meet my quota here or anywhere else. And so it happened that for the rest of the day, Rimaru stayed in the temple, and the following day, Kasha arrived by boat to try to enter within. And despite being the king, the priest did not allow him to enter. And as the current tradition stood, only the needy were allowed to enter the temple, and such should the rich require a mass, a random priest will be sent to the city church to minister to their sinful souls. Though according to Brutus, the priests had been refusing service all folks in the mainland, and the reason why was one that nobody in the temple seemed eager to talk about or even think about, and they would return when the offending party was either punished by the law or if the fellow performed acts of contrition. And this act came in the form of self-imposed public humiliation, and the fellow would parade himself throughout town, screaming and whipping himself for his sin. In the screams, the fellow was supposed to make it very clear the nature of his crime. And during breakfast, Bruto explained to me this. For you see, my little squid friend, there is a difference between between what is considered right and wrong in the temple and in the city, and due to our new cosmopolitan nature, a lot of sinful practices are becoming socially acceptable. And just because a lot of islanders consider something bad normal doesn't make the bad thing any less sinful. I find it odd for a soulless hunk of metal to take religious very seriously, said Mindy's, raising an eyebrow. I am the original Coppelia. The only difference is that nobody came to say the dude that was sacrificed to give me life, said Brutus, laughing. Good riddance, I say, said Lorica, and she added, any guy who abandons his woman for a hunk of junk doesn't deserve to live. And why do you think we're still together, my dear, said Brutus, smiling, and thank you for calling me a hunk of junk. It speaks well of your taste in men. Time?
3 minutes.
Brutus and Lorica then proceeded to exchange unpleasantries like an old married couple, and in the meantime Rimaru had silently left the temple to wander about the forest, and she closed her eyes as she listened to a sound that only she could hear, and with its music in place she started to dance with her entire focus on her craft, knowing everything and everyone around her. And just like her singing, there was a soulless quality about her dancing, and she danced as if she no longer enjoyed it, which was sad but true. And it had been her sweet vampire assistant that had made Rimaru try her starlet career for real. And before then, she listened for her own amusement on the ground, unseen by anyone, not even her siblings. And when she blossomed into a rose, she was quickly disappointed by the fact that nobody truly saw her, nor took her work in earnest. And things had become worse when her sweet vampire became insane and had to be pulled down like the rabid dog she had become. Not that killing her was a sin, rather Rimaru only helped her pass on to the next life. And the poor vampire was an undead creature after all, nothing but a static on a radio. And with the static gone, Rimaru had no other choice but to listen to the music that was the world. Though at times she found a way to abstract herself from everything and everyone, and she was brought out of her reverie by somebody purposely standing in her path. And she turned to dance in another direction, but the fellow detained her by holding onto her slender shoulder. And pushing the fellow back, she noticed that the man standing before her was Amis. Don't you have anything better to do with your time? Asked Rimaru. I could ask you the very same thing, said Amis. Rimaru said, say your piece and be gone, or on second thought, I am going to be gone. Rimaru flew up into the sky and Amis followed, and he had recently augmented himself with the technology he had gotten during his travels. And he was still trying to recreate some of the stuff he had read up in the libraries and in the other worlds, and he may have been forbidden from taking any technology with him, but there was nothing that could be done about the information stored inside his mind. And Ami was a very talented refrigerator with plenty of storage space. And Rimaru then changed forms, and he became a creature without eyes or ears, and laughing, she said, good luck saying your piece now. And Rimaru felt a rock thrown behind her head, and she opened one of her weird eyes, and she saw Brutus mouthing, stop being a child, and come down and speak like civilized adults. Time?
Less than a minute.
Alright, we'll leave it here.